Welcome to episode 5 of The War Room. And today we're going to be watching tape on 3 Ole Miss prospects. We've got Laremy Tunsil, the offensive tackle who played left tackle for Ole Miss. He did suffer a serious injury in the Peach Bowl, it's worth adding. And there's Robert Nademski, who was the #1 overall recruit coming out of high school, just like Jadeveon Clowney was. But now he has some competition for that #1 pick as Joey Bosa has emerged into a sack artist. He's emerged into that guy. There were some things we disliked about Bosa. He relies on his swim moves to get to the quarterback. You don't see him use rip moves or pure strength. He relies on his arms, wingspan, and his agility to use his arms to get past interior offensive linemen and offensive tackles to get to the quarterback. Or to get a quarterback hurry or a tackle for a loss by stuffing the run at the line of scrimmage. That's what Bosa does. Now, I haven't seen what Robert Nademski can do, but I hear he's pretty good. And then there's Laquan Treadwell, the Ole Miss wide receiver. Now, Treadwell played with Cody Pruitt. Cody Pruitt's on defense. What am I thinking? I'm thinking Dante Moncrief. He played with Dante Moncrief as a freshman, and as a sophomore, he was the #1 receiver. He had to step up, make all the big plays. So we're going to see these guys on tape, and we're going to see what they can do. And we'll start with Laremy Tunsil's tape versus Ole Miss, Mississippi State. And good. I screwed something up here. Okay, so we'll go to screen share, pull up the Laremy Tunsil YouTube channel here. And we'll pull this up in full screen. Hopefully you're still here, Joey. And here he is. The arrow is the Mississippi Ole Miss left tackle. Now, it looks like he got beat on that play. Preston Smith clearly got the better of him in that matchup. He did an all right job as a run blocker on that play. So he has that explosive first step where he can charge up near a defender if he has to, and if he gets the right hand placement on the ball. That was just a bad throw by Bo Wallace. He did a nice job blocking there. Again, Preston Smith's able to get some pressure on him, but he's able to have enough stamina to execute the block. His back didn't look straight on that last play. That was a good block, but the secondary showed up there. Bo Wallace is just making some very pedestrian throws. There he's charging to the outside. He's showing off a little zone blocking. And it worked. So he's a pretty good zone blocker. I think his zone blocking is the best from what I've seen so far on tape. He's got good hands. If he can make contact with the defender, he's going to hold his own. Did a good job pass blocking. That was probably his best pass block, and it resulted in a completion. Now, this time he was focused on run blocking on a passing play. Let's go back and watch that last play where Bo Wallace threw an interception. We're just going to do this real quick because here's the play. It's 1st and 10 here. And this is a passing play, and he's charging the defender as if he's run blocking, meaning he's already failed his assignment. When you're calling a passing play, you want to stay calm. You want to stay on that offensive line, and you want to wait for the defender to come to you. Now, what he does is the exact opposite. He charges the defender. Bo Wallace has no time And as a result, it's a Mississippi State interception. This time he does a much better job pass blocking, allowing Laquan Treadwell to get a completion. And there's also a chat box, Joey. If you want to comment with some of your thoughts on here, you can. And I'm looking at some tape here. I mean, he looked better on this second series. '78 Tunsil, so does a good job pushing back here, help run blocking. He's not like DeCastro where he can push a defender 5 yards back, but he plays well enough to push the defender 2 yards back. He just sat there like erect flowers and waited for nothing on that play. But he mirrored the defenseman good enough so that Wallace would have the time to throw. There he gets pushed backward, or he has to move backward to keep the defender. That play looks like he didn't have his back straight on that play. Good completion there and good pass blocking on his end. This time he's run blocking. He gets pushed back a little bit. Here's a play where he's lined up as a right tackle. Now, I thought this was a left tackle only, but here they insert him in at right tackle on one play, and it translates to a touchdown. So maybe you move this guy over to right tackle. If putting Laramie Tunsil at right tackle is going to get you touchdowns, then heck, start him at right tackle. He looked very good at right tackle on that one play. So does a good job there, keeps his back straight, executes the block, allows Bo Wallace to complete the pass. Back straight, Bo Wallace, completion, Ole Miss first down. This play, they lined him up as a left guard. I don't know if you noticed that, but they lined, so he can move to the interior offensive line as well. And he did a good job in pass protection on the interior offensive line. So, yeah, I mean, that's cool that he can do that. He gives you that versatility to be an offensive tackle or a guard, just like Brian Bulaga. So I'm seeing a guy that has the run blocking of William Beatty, the zone blocking of Trent Williams, the versatility of Brandon Scherf. That's who I meant to say, because he reminds me a little of Scherf with his versatility. And he's inconsistent with his pass protection. So there are moments where this guy will pass block like to Brickishaw Ferguson, and then there are other moments where he will pass block like Michael Orr. He has good footwork as a run blocker. He has great run blocking footwork. I don't think he's the strongest offensive lineman, but I think he's got tremendous size. Because there aren't plays where he's showing off his run blocking strength by pushing a defender back 5 yards like David DeCastro. You don't see there are many plays where he's using pass blocking strength to keep his defenseman in check. He does have some pass blocking ability, but okay, there's a play where he just pushed the defender back 5 yards. I retract that. See, he pushes that blocker. gets by a second blocker. So he shows some run blocking strength on that play. Again, he starts to show some run blocking strength late in this game as this Mississippi State defense just looks worn down. He misses his assignment on that play and gives up a sack. So, well, he didn't give up a sack, but the tight end was blocking the defensive end, and they never should have had the tight end blocking him. And that's the thing. If you put the defensive tackle on this guy and you have your defensive end get by a guard or a tight end, it's going to be easier to rush the quarterback. This time, I think he lined up at left guard. It might have been a left tackle in that play. That's the center, and that's 78. So now he's back at left tackle. But they lined him in up at left guard. It resulted in a gain. So a gain of 8 yards. We're not watching Laramie Tunsil versus Boise State. Or do you want to watch Laramie Tunsil versus Boise State, Joey? You know what? Let's watch Laramie Tunsil versus Boise State.
Is my microphone running?
Yes,
here?
It is on, Joey. Your microphone is on. What did you think of the first tape of Tunsil?
With the feed's a little bit choppy, but from what I get, I think he could be one of those players that, at the very least, a starting right tackle. I think he could slide into guard. Overall, I thought he did a good job of handling the outside pass rush, but there's always room for improvement there. His feet need to be quick. He had moments where his feet weren't quite as quick as I would like to see. So he still has some development, but I'm interested to see where he goes in the season, in his next season.
You've done scouting reports on Jack Conklin and the other guy out of Ohio State, Taylor Decker. Where do you think Tunsil stacks up compared to those guys? Because I know you've had those guys' reports done already for draftevolution.com, and Tunsil's projected as a top 5 pick in every mock draft I've read so far.
I think he's behind Conklin. Right now, that may be because I've watched, while I haven't written the actual report up yet, I've watched quite a bit of Conklin, and I love the way he handles himself. He does a good job against the pass rush. He's aggressive. He's got good feet, and for me, he does bend his back a little bit, but I think he right now is ahead of everybody else in the class. But I think Tunsil is probably more versatile, and that'll add value, because where Conklin can play right or left guard or right or left tackle, I'm thinking Tunsil could slide into guard easily and play right and left tackle. And as we're seeing that versatility in the NFL today, the more versatile you can be, the more they can do with you, the more they'll value you.
When I started watching this tape, my impression was Laramie Tunsil, he's be a left tackle only. He looks like he's going to be an elite run blocker and a great but not elite pass protector. That was the impression I got before popping in the tape. But after seeing things now, like I said, I think this guy's best asset is his zone blocking and his versatility, because I see that same versatility that Brandon Scherf had heading into last year's draft when I watched Laramie Tunsil. And I think he's a good run blocker, because I think that's one of his strongest qualities, and kind of reminds me of William Beatty as a run blocker, the Giants left tackle, and his zone blocking compares to Trent Williams, the Redskins left tackle. So there are some things I like, and the fact that he has that versatility to move inside to guard or right tackle definitely helps him out.
Yeah, and if you look at, if at the very least he turns into a Beatty, I wouldn't be upset with that if he turned into a Beatty-like player, because Beatty's no slouch. He's a good player. Trent Williams, I think Trent Williams is underrated. But at the same time, Trent Williams needs to stay on the field. He's injury prone. So if he can turn into a Trent Williams without being injury prone, I think that's easily a top 10 selection.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because he got injured in the Peach Bowl. And if he gets injured again right after getting injured in the Peach Bowl, scouts are going to say he has durability concerns because that's 2 injuries in such a quick time span.
Yeah, and that's what, I know this is an unrelated note. Well, somewhat unrelated. But I know if you look under Mike Pettin with the Browns, if you look at Rex Ryan, what he did, and those guys who worked in that system, it's getting to the place to where they're saying we're not taking any chances with these guys. They're like, okay, the doctors cleared them to come back. We're going to give them another month and a half. We're not going to let them go out there go full go because of the risk of injury. Now, and in some ways that's good as long as you keep them, doing sprints or whatever because they are technically cleared. If Ole Miss takes that approach, it could definitely help him and the team when it comes to him recovering.
Yeah, because Ole Miss had all these talented NFL draft prospects, and it looked like they were in the driver's seat to make the college football playoff. But I think before the season ended, like what happened with Tunsil is he suffered an injury in like week 8, the 8th or 9th game of the season. It caused him to miss the rest of the regular season. Then he came back for the Chick-fil-A, the Peach Bowl game in Atlanta, and he got injured again and had to leave the game. So he got injured twice last season. So
yeah, that, and everybody puts him in the top 5. It's like, why the heck you putting a guy who's getting injured 2-3 times a year in the top 5? That would, you say he gets injured once. I'm like, okay, that's good, because I didn't pay as much attention to him last year. He was a sophomore.
Now I remember he missed some games near the end of the season. He came back for the Mississippi State game, which I remember. But I think when he played some of the other teams, like after the LSU game, I think he may have missed a game against Auburn or something down the stretch. Because I remember some of the college football experts saying Laramie Tunsil got injured, he missed a game, or he missed a few games. So
yeah, he's going to have to play a full season to even sniff the top 10 because, you get injured twice in a year. And if he gets injured this year, my advice would be stay in school, make sure you play that full year because if you don't, you've been hurt enough, your draft stock is not going to be a good one.
He might be the second offensive tackle if he returned to school next year because Alabama's got that Cyril Richardson guy or whatever his name is. It was a 5-star recruit, Cameron Robinson, I think. He's been the left tackle since his freshman year, and obviously Robinson would go top 5, and Tunsil could still go top 10 in 2017. But I think the best case scenario is, let's say a team like Denver fell apart and went 5-11. They could take Tunsil at 3. That's the best case scenario. I don't think that will happen, but if it did, he'd go there. And if it didn't, I'm really not sure what to think. With I saw Taylor Decker's tape. He looked like a good run blocker who has a chance to develop into an elite run blocker if he develops one more season and stays healthy. And I see an average pass blocker that could become good with another solid year. And, I think Tunsil is the better run blocker right now. But at the same time, I think Taylor Decker is a more consistent pass blocker than Tunsil based off of what I've seen. Anything you'd like to add to that before I go to the tape for Robert Ndemski?
No, there's only so much you can get from one little piece of tape. So, I do know, but what I can say is, it doesn't take long to see a player and say, this guy's worth scouting more or this guy isn't worth scouting as much. So, we're looking at, and I think this guy is worth scouting more. So I'm going to put a little bit more effort into it here in the next couple months and see what comes out of it.
Here we go, Robert Nademski, because this guy was listed at 6'6", 300 pounds, meaning he'd have to move to 3-4 defensive end instead of playing a 43 defensive end role, which is what he's played his entire career. Because he has to be, he can stick with 290, but here we go. Oh, I don't want Leonard Williams highlights. I've already seen Leonard Williams. Come on, man.
Nobody's ever seen Leonard Williams. He is a really small guy. Incredibly skinny.
Here we go, Robert Nademski, Ole Miss highlights.
Okay.
Nobody see sarcasm.
I got to bring something to this.
Green here. Cody Pruitt. I'm playing Ole Miss Where's Waldo, trying to identify as many NFL draft prospects in the intro as possible. Okay, there's Nademski, number 5. Only in college football can you wear number 5 and be a defensive end. Wow.
Like that first step.
That was a nice first step. I mean, he's tearing apart these interior offensive linemen. I mean, he's destroying these guards.
Yeah, the athleticism is. He's got to get lower on that tackle, though. Yeah, he's standing straight up on the tackle.
Yeah, that's a 34 play.
Oh, that was great hands.
He gets pressure, and that was Jarvis Harrison he got by in that play. So he can play against NFL competition, and he sets up a nice interception for Cody Pruitt.
Yeah, he looks extremely athletic. How much did you say he weighed?
He's 6'5", 293.
He doesn't look 293. So that means he's probably got room to add some bulk.
He was 6'4" or 6'3" and 270 pounds in high school.
Yeah, he carries that body weight extremely well.
And they line him up at defensive tackle or defensive end.
Did you see that bull rush?
Yeah, that was a great bull rush.
Yeah.
I see a lot more power moves from Robert Nademski. I think Joey Bosa's got the better swim moves of any defensive end in this draft. But when I look at the guy with the best power moves, no doubt about it, it is Robert Nademski.
Yeah, from Joey Bosa, Oakman, how do you pronounce his name? Radensky?
Nademski.
Rademski. Yeah. The raging Russian, I guess you could say. I mean, this group may turn out to be a pretty darn good defensive line group, one of the better ones we've seen in a couple years.
I know Nademski only has Nakim Deshe or Nademski. He only has had 4 sacks, but he's getting to the quarterback a lot more than Bosa did, and he played much tougher competition. Like, he's rushing the quarterback. I think he had like 10 quarterback hurries and I think 12 tackles for a loss. So even if he didn't sack the quarterback a lot, there were plays where he made the quarterback look silly. So
yeah, as a defensive lineman, the glory statistic are the sacks. It's not the one that we look at most. Yeah, it's an indicator of how much you're in the backfield at times, but the stats I look to first thing, tackles for loss. I look at, if I can find the stats for them, depending on the school, knockdowns, quarterback pressures. You can cause more disruption, like right here, he's back on his horse, he causes more disruption without getting a sack. So the difference he makes, as a pass rusher or just somebody who can get into the backfield will be far greater than somebody who just takes credit for getting the sacks. So that's something you have to look at. Somebody I loved out of this year's draft was Kuaku, Washington.
Hikaha.
For some reason, it just slipped my mind. Sorry. And I loved what he did. Yeah, if you watch the tape on his sacks, a lot of his sacks, he didn't have, to beat as many guys because they were all focused inside. But, what he did a lot of defensive mirroring. To stop the run, he'd play the slot a little bit. He would, move around. He wasn't always rushing the passer. So when he got to the quarterback, a lot of times because attention was elsewhere. I love what he did. I thought he was a great athlete, great pass rusher. But that doesn't mistake that. He was the beneficiary. Now, who caused the disruption that allowed him to get there? I would argue that that's the more valuable player. And so, in that case, with Nadimchi, I will get this right one day.
Robert Nkemdiche, I think, because Nkemdiche. That's his last name. So it's Robert Nkemdiche, I think. I don't know.
But anyway, so I would argue that even though he only had 4 sacks, though, he may be a better prospect when all is said and done if he can stay healthy and continue to improve.
Absolutely. I'm in complete agreement there because I knew this guy had the versatility to plug in and play any position on the defensive line, and I thought, well, he's mainly a run stuffer. He's got to improve his pass rush, even though he had an excellent pass rush in high school. And I don't think he has to – well, he still has to improve his pass rush, but his pass rush looks much better than I thought it would be. And if he gets more sacks than Joey Bosa this season, I'm taking him number 1 overall over Bosa simply because I like what he does better. There were things. You look at the sacks Bosa made. He made them against weaker competition, and he used swim moves. He didn't use power moves to try to get by the offensive lineman with his rip moves and upper body strength like Nkemdiche did. He used swim moves where he relied on his wings, the wingspan of his arms and the agility of his arms, and waiting for an offensive lineman to lack that. And he only got by offensive linemen that lacked footwork or lacked awareness, and they missed their assignment. That's the only time he got by an offensive lineman. Nkemdiche was going up against SEC competition, and he was making plays, okay? So he was really making a lot happen, and he used rip moves and swim moves. He showed some block shedding, showed some ability to be a bull rusher off the edge. There were a lot of things I loved about this guy on tape, and I think he has more intangibles than he's leading you to believe. And when all's said and done, I could see him going ahead of Joey Bosa if he gets more sacks this season.
Yeah, the thing with that is I looked first thing, what was the first play in that tape? What did I say on that as a great first step? With and that a lot of the times is the difference between a good defensive lineman and a great defensive lineman. If you look at Joey Bosa, as we've been talking about, there was another great, Minnesota Vikings, Kansas City Chiefs. Give me a name.
Jared Allen.
Jared Allen. When he rushed the passer, he was all first step, athleticism, arms. Not much different than Joey Bosa. The difference is the attitude. Will Joey Bosa bring that attitude? So it can be done, but he will make it harder on himself if he doesn't learn rip, swim, spin, and so on and so forth. So that's something you also have to take into consideration.
Absolutely. I mean, I thought his swim moves were good on tape, but he didn't show the rip moves and physicality that you saw from Nikimdish. And the other thing is, I just played a little clip of him against Arkansas. There were plays where Arkansas triple teamed him and he was frustrated. And then there were other plays where they triple teamed him and he got by the triple teams. You know Robert Nikimdish can win a triple team. We haven't seen what Joey Bosa can do against a triple team. And we know what Nikimdish can do when being triple teamed. So I think that gives him an advantage over Bosa as well.
Well, we're going to see more from Bosa this season because some of those defensive linemen, a couple of those guys are gone. A couple of those guys that were beside Bosa. So you're going to see Bosa get more of the attention this year. So, McKimdish, he didn't have that protection that Bosa did. So now we're going to see, can Bosa keep up when he doesn't have the defensive tackles beside him to play around with?
Yeah, Michael Bennett is gone. He was a good run stuffer. He complimented him well. Nikimdish didn't have that, and he commanded respect on this defense. So he originally had Noah Spence his freshman year, not this year, but he had Noah Spence and Bennett his freshman year before Spence got dismissed from the team. So Bosa is going to have to step up, and he's going to have to repeat that 13 sacks or get at least 10 or 11 like Vic Beasley did if he wants to be the number one pick. If he can do that, he'll go number one overall. And I think regardless of who ends up with the number one pick, I think Jacksonville's going to end up with the number one pick. But it's no longer Joey Bosa's a stone-cold lock. I think Nikimdish, if he can get more sacks than Bosa, and Ole Miss gets to the college football playoff just like Ohio State, all of a sudden he becomes that guy. And it could turn into a Ryan Leaf versus Peyton Manning debate over which defensive end is more worthy of going number one overall. I really believe that.
Yeah, and you really have to look, though, something I've asked you in the past. Are you going to have a situation with a Peyton Manning or a Deion Sanders, guys that walk into an interview and either say, and ask them point blank, where are you picking? Or sit down and interview the front office that's supposed to be interviewing them. People who can command that type of respect, bring that kind of essence into a room, to where everybody says, okay, this has got to be the guy, simply because of how they carry themselves and the basic respect and aura about them. And I think if one of those guys can maybe not distinguish himself at that level, but if they come down to a dead heat, maybe they distinguish themselves in another way, like just with the presence in the room.
I know this is intense, but I thought we watched all the Nikimdish highlights. We've seen him against Arkansas, we've seen him against Boise State, and I think we've seen him, so those are the two games we've seen him in, and I think we may have seen him against Auburn. So this is Mississippi State, and after this we will go to Laquan Treadwell. I mean, we can actually fast forward some of this if you think we've seen enough of Nikimdish to make a conclusion.
Well, when you have to realize when I watch film of somebody, I watch as much as humanly possible. It's like my Nick Foles, it's like I watched every game Nick Foles played for 2 years by the end of my scouting report. So, I could sit here and watch film all day on a prospect. I have no problem doing that.
So we'll watch tape on this guy, and then we will go to the Laquan Treadwell tape, because there were plays where I think in his first highlight when he showed off all those abilities, he saw him against Auburn, you saw him against Texas A&M, you saw him against Florida, just clips of him making plays in those games. Now, in the second highlight, you saw him being triple teamed by Arkansas. And in this highlight, it's just what the good, the bad, and the ugly against Mississippi State. Now, strange here is he's being blocked against the left guard. Gabe Jackson's no longer the left guard on this team, so he's having trouble against that left guard matchup. I think Dylan Day's on this offensive line. He was a sender, and then there's another guy that's the left guard that was the right guard last year. But there are 2 NFL guards on this interior offensive line, and he's had some early struggles here. Okay, Mississippi State, they're trying to open up the running lanes for Josh Robinson, and they're losing their left tackle and 3 other starters on the offensive line next season. And Dak Prescott has to deal with that along with losing Josh Robinson. And that's the thing. If Dak Prescott does well without his offensive lineman, he's got a chance to be a top 5 pick in the draft and possibly the first quarterback taken. If he doesn't do well without his offensive lineman, teams are going to see that, and they're going to move him down on the boards. It's really that simple.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what some people don't understand is with quarterback, when they say play well, it doesn't mean put up huge numbers. It means, is he being accurate with his passes? Is he making good decisions? Can he still get out of the pocket? Maybe not, you don't have to be a huge athlete. Something they don't tell you a lot is the difference between an athletic quarterback and a mobile quarterback. The athletic quarterback, he'll go out and run for 25 yards. A mobile quarterback will, could be as much as some people say Peyton Manning is a good mobile quarterback because he can slide his feet. He can get away from the pass rush. If he has to, he can get outside a little bit to make his pass. He doesn't like to, but he can. And, it's mobility versus athleticism. They're 2 different things, 2 different quarterbacks, but a lot of people jumble those up. So what is Prescott going to show when he loses all this? Is he going to show that he can be because we know he's an athletic quarterback, but can he be a mobile quarterback where maybe one of the offensive line, the interior guards break down and he has to just step outside a little bit, not run, but step outside and make a solid pass. And that's what we're going to find out.
Absolutely. And with Joey Bosa, since he's got some big height as well, I've seen him listed as high as 273 and as high as 293. And with Joey Bosa, some people have compared him to J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt had good rip and swim moves. Joey Bosa only has good swim moves, and he relies on his athleticism. So I liked your Jared Allen comparison better.
Yeah, Jared Allen was one of my favorite players ever. I mean, he rocked the mullet when the mullet wasn't even in style anymore. Okay? I mean, he had a nasty disposition. You knew he was coming. He took his weaknesses, his arms, and the fact that he was all arms, he didn't have a lot of muscle, and he turned them into his greatest strengths. He kept people away from him. He used the swim move perfectly, and he developed a great first step while carrying himself like a 200. Yeah, you knew he was like 240 pounds, 245 pounds. Carried himself like a 270 pounder. You knew he wasn't a 270 pounder. But when you got out on the field, he carried himself that way. Like he was larger than life. And I think that's something that Bosa is going to have to learn.
Absolutely. And then with Nakimdish, I see a guy that can stop the run like a defense like Ndamukong Suh. He's got that versatility to plug in and play any position on the defensive line like Mario Edwards, the Florida State defensive end, and he pass rushes like Julius Peppers. That's what I see with Ndamukong on tape, and that's pretty good.
Yeah, and something else you have to remember, something those guys don't have, they don't have any more room to grow. Their bodies are filled out. They are what they are. You knew Sue was going to be dominant. You knew he did coming out. You knew he didn't have a lot of room to grow with that because he was what he was. And he still is what he was then, and he is what he is. But with this kid, I see a lot of room for growth. He's doing a lot of different things with his hands, with the bull rush, with his athleticism. I think he has room to put muscle on his body, add weight. I would like to see his footwork improve, and I would like to see more consistent effort because a lot of these times I've seen on a couple of these highlights that there were openings he didn't take advantage of, and others, the offensive lineman did a good job of holding him up.
Fatigued. Sorry about interrupting you there, but he was breathing real fast and excessively. He looked kind of fatigued, and I noticed it for a split second. So I wanted to bring it up and get your 2 cents. But you can continue what you were saying now.
Yeah, but he has footwork. I've seen. I know these offensive linemen right here. He's against a great offensive line. But some of those things, all it'll take, it's something that they taught us back when I was playing. It's kind of the Mr. Miyagi thing. Wax on, wax off. Some of those offensive linemen, yeah, they're supposed to keep you at distance, but they've got to have a little fold in their elbow in order to keep strength on the point, in order to keep leverage. Some of those guys are straight arm. So it's like wax on, wax off, use your footwork to get by. Take their hand. He's got strong arms. Smack the arms. They get straight arms there. You're literally looking the perfect chance. Hit them right around the wrist. Maybe, that wrist bone that connects the hand to the wrist. Hit them right above or right below that. With, a lot of them say, use open hand. No, you take it, you have your fist, you hit that with the side of your fist, you knock those arms aside, and then you use your footwork. After that, it's not about athleticism as much as it is, can you get your feet in between the two defenders? So, if he learns that, if he learns how to get the footwork, just little things right now. So he has room to grow. He's a great athlete, but as you said, he fatigues. So what's he got to work on? His conditioning, his lungs. He's got the muscle. Now he's got to work on the lungs. So, there are things, there is room to grow. And I love that about him.
Yes, so there's moves about him, and I've seen him line up at left end and right end in this game, as well as defensive tackle. And because he's the size of a 34 defensive end, he should be able to make the transition if he ends up playing for a team that runs a 34 defense.
Yeah, one thing I don't see him doing, I don't see him standing up. I don't see him as a rush linebacker. He is strictly hands in the dirt. But on the flip side of that, if he's taken by a 43 team, I think they might find a gem there because, his skill set, on passing downs, he'll be able to slide inside, get a third pass rusher there. But on running downs, he'll be able to work that 43 defensive end. So, especially in a wide 9 situation where you have the defensive front 7 spread, if you can pull him inside on a wide 9, that would also be excellent for your defense in that regard.
Yeah, that's the thing with the Kimdish. I see a guy that looks pretty good in terms of his overall ability, and I think the only positions he couldn't play are rush linebacker because he's too big with his size, and maybe nose tackle because he's not big enough to play nose tackle. But if you put him any other position on a defensive line in the 43 or the 34, he's not an outside linebacker. He's purely a defensive lineman in the 43 or the 34. And I think the only position he can't play is nose tackle. I think he can play any other position on the defensive line in a 43 or a 34, and you'll probably agree with me there.
Yeah, and here's one. A lot of 34 teams, when it comes to some of them play an over-under base set. In that situation, I believe he could play rush linebacker if he is playing the under position, because you're going to be down on the line. Your hand's still going to be in the dirt. And even if you're not directly on the line, you're going to be close enough to where you're right there and you're basically doing the same things as you would be in a wide 9.
Yeah, and with him, I see a guy that, Laquan Treadwell, perfect. That's on the top of the screen. But before we go to that, I see a guy that is really good in terms of technique. He can't play the 0 technique, but he could probably play the 1 technique where he goes against the guards. He could probably play the 2 technique, even though I think he'd be better at 1 technique. He can play the 3 technique and the 4 technique. He can play the 5 technique if he has to adjust to a 34, and he can probably play the 7 technique and the 6 technique if he ends up at defensive end. So the fact that he can play those different techniques helps. And as far as Vernon Hargreaves goes, I watched the corners the other day, and I loved Kendall Fuller, the Virginia Tech corner, because he was making plays against Amari Cooper when his brother was covering the other receiver. Like, he was swatting passes down when Kendall Fuller was covering Alabama's other receivers. And with Hargreaves, he just got picked apart by Amari Cooper on tape. But it's not just that. I mean, I just think that Kendall Fuller having a brother that's in the NFL definitely helps him out. He didn't get as many interceptions as a sophomore, but he still made plays. He's a hard hitter like Troy Polamalu, and he covers like Joe Hayden. He's not a Peterson or a Sherman cover corner, but he can cover like Hayden. And what's scary is Vernon Hargreaves might actually get drafted higher than Joe Hayden. And I see a guy like Jalen Collins. He has the versatility to play anywhere on the secondary, but he misses a lot of tackles. And you don't want a guy that's going to miss a lot of tackles on tape.
Yeah, that brings you back to Gerard Holloman. It's like, why did he fall? He was a late first, early second round prospect. Why did he fall to the 7th round? Because, as one NFL scouting director said, he can't tackle. And if you can't tackle in the NFL, you can't play. So he's going to have to learn to tackle. And that goes for every prospect out there. They think, yeah, we're going to get by on our highlights. We're going to get by on our ball skills. We're going to get by on this. We're going to get by on that. No, you're not. If you can't tackle in the NFL, what are you going to do if you have give me a big running back coming at it, Give me a name of a big running back, Chris. Okay, let's go with Peyton Hillis. Let's just say you got a guy with arms the size of tree trunks, 250 pounds, barreling down at you. What are you going to do? Eddie Lacy. You see Eddie Lacy trucking at you. What are you going to do? Are you going to say, well, my ball making skills, they're pretty good, but, I sure wish I would have learned how to tackle. Because while you're thinking this, you're also thinking, oh, crap. And as that brown stains on your pants, you're suddenly seeing yourself with cleat marks on your stomach because you just got run over because you can't tackle. So, you have to know how to tackle in this game. The higher up you get, you can't rely on raw ability anymore.
Yeah, it's funny because Walter Football has Kendall Fuller in the top 10 and Vernon Hargreaves in the top 5. And my other writer at Draft Utopia, the guy that just joined our staff, Troy Mario, I think his name is, might not be Troy Mario, but his last name is Mario. And I know that he had Vernon Hargreaves going second overall to the Raiders, and I think he had Kendall Fuller going in the top 10 as well. So I don't think Hargreaves is that good. USA Today has Kendall Fuller listed as the third best prospect, and USA Today also has Vernon Hargreaves listed as the 26th best prospect, according to DJ Boyer of DraftSite.com. And I agree with that comparison. I think that if Fuller can tackle, he can make hard hits like Troy Polamalu, and he covers like Joe Hayden, he's a top 10 pick. I wouldn't go as far as to call him a top 5 pick, but with the demand for corner, someone might take him in the top 5, especially if a team like the 49ers is picking that early, which probably won't happen, but you never know. So it really depends on who's picking at that spot. But I could see Kendall Fuller going in the top 5. And if USA Today has Hargreaves at 26, that means they probably watched some tape and they saw some things they didn't like.
Yeah, and these are guys that I'm going to watch more of as the summer continues. So I'll be able to say more then what happens. But if it's basically if you've got a consensus, the consensus is basically something I might do this year coming up is write down all the major mock drafts that I can get a hold of from across the web, average out draft position, create a consensus. Because
DraftSite.com does that. They have like an average draft position for every mock draft poster on their forum. Like they take the people on their forum and they use that for like their draft positioning.
Yeah, and I wouldn't use a forum. I would use I'd make a consensus on it overall. Using a forum, it's like, we were both members of the Walter Football Forum for quite a while. I was actually one of the top 55 members of that site. I was one of the first people when he got big. It's like some mock drafts, man. It's like there were some interesting.
There's like 90,000 total people on his forum that have registered accounts, but there's usually only 50 people on at a time. I remember back in the day when he got big in like 2010 or 2011, when we were both on, when it was in his peak, I remember there were at least 100 or 200 users on at one time. Now there's only 50. Still pretty big sample size, but besides Blue, most of them are guys that registered or joined the message boards after we did. But they still post very frequently to the point where they're getting promoted to Matt Millen status for making so many posts.
Oh, that's not ever good. But yeah, when you look at that though, it's the sample size is like something you learn if you're into science and stuff. It's like sample size is great. But what's the quality of the sample size? So, we have a pretty large quality, thankfully, across the web. If we make a great sample size, a good sample size plus a quality sample size. If you have a bad sample, your quality is going to decrease and people aren't going to take it as seriously. If you have a higher quality with a strong sample size, then people are going to take it more seriously.
Yeah. So I still think Walter Football is a legit site. They have the best draft site, best football content, I think, of any other draft site. But in terms of hockey, they don't cover hockey like the Hockey Writers or Draft Site or like we do here at Draft Utopia, because I know our hockey mock drafts are getting ranked ahead of NHL.com on Google's search engine. We're still behind Draft Site, but I mean, we really don't have – when we try to make our NHL mock drafts, we try to do write-ups of the picks, unlike Draft Site, and I try to buy the magazines and get as much research, as much data done, watch as much tape as possible, and I've got 10 players graded out for that. And with this, it's like with football – You're lucky if you can even make the first 4 pages of a mock draft search engine, because Walter Football, Draft Countdown, Draft Geek, all those sites that have been around for years, those guys have worked their way up the ladder, and they've already claimed dibs on certain spots in the search engine. And you're not going to change that no matter how much work you put in to it. So I've been able to get ahead of Roto World and right behind Sports Illustrated. And that's pretty good for where I'm at this time, at age 24. So to be where those sites are at in a search engine when you're just starting out is pretty good.
Yeah, that it is. I mean, you started young. You have to remember, Walter started his site as a high school senior. You started, what, as college freshman or something like that?
I was 21, and I was coming
Yeah.
coming off a semester at CCAC, but I didn't know how to code until I was 23. Like, I knew how to code. I remember taking a web design course, and I designed a Seven Springs Resort website for this. Like, I designed a fake Seven Springs website, and that was our final project. We had to design a website for a company. Like, we had to take a company. They gave us a few companies, and you had to redesign the website. And I chose to do ads. I chose to do a Seven Springs website. And I had to put banner ads up, so I took ads of old companies that no longer existed, like Singular Phone Service and Funkoland, not GameStop, Funkoland, the original video game outlet before GameStop came in and took over the entire industry. And I decided just to have fun with it and post banner ads of old companies that no longer existed but kicked ass and were really awesome. And I got an A because of that. I had like a C. I was barely passing the course, but I did so well on that project, I got bumped up from a 75 to a 91.
Yep, and that's good. I mean, that, and like I tell you, it's like, I've been coding for 6 months. It's a lot of times that's what you have to start somewhere.
I had the GoDaddy website builder for 2 years, and I didn't even know how to get rid of that or put my code on the web. But I started coding some pages at Slippery Rock because I had a vision of making Draft Utopia, kind of like Bleacher Report, except with more content, more layers and layers of content. NBA D-League, AAA. Can figure out, okay, this minor league prospect that got drafted is on this team. They're this close to making the MLB. This NHL draft prospect's on this minor league team or junior league team, and they're this close to making the NHL. And it's going to take, my dad told me when I first did this that if you're going to do this and commit to this is going to take years for you to set up and perfect. And I just ignored him and was like, it's not going to take that long. It might take me a few months. And then I realized, okay, I coded the site for the first time, and it took me 8 months just to get the yellow nav bar up, but that still looked like crap. And I started recoding it. Instead of waiting until the new year, I started recoding that aspect of it now. And I'm almost done with all the NHL pages, and I'm completely done with the NFL pages. So, yeah, he was right. It is going to take time. Years.
Yeah, that's why I keep telling people, it's like, it's all about, how patient are you?
And at Slippery Rock, they don't teach you how to like put the PHP code. They teach you how to design the form, but they don't teach you how to design the form to a web hosting service like GoDaddy, because they know if the student figures that out, guess what? The student can just buy their own company, drop out of college, and if they drop out of college, the school loses money. So they know that. The teachers probably know how to put the form on a web server, but they don't want to teach the students that so that they'll stay in college and they can make more money off the student. And that's a good strategy for a school.
Well, yeah, because in America, colleges are a business. It's not like Europe. It's not like countries that put education as the forefront driving factor. In America, it's the money. So their business model is a sound business model.
Yes. So then I bought more books, and I was like, I'm going to reread everything in my book from CCAC on JavaScript, CSS, and apply certain concepts to designing the website with some CSS and some features. But then I picked up a HTML5 game development for dummies book because I was curious how to make video games. And I struggled with that at first, even though I read a lot of concepts in JavaScript in the book. And then at Panera, I saw these books like John Duckett that had visuals in them. They were colored and they had visuals in them. There was an HTML and CSS one, and then there was a JavaScript and jQuery one. And he teaches you how to design forms in HTML, but he doesn't teach you how to make PHP code that'll allow you to convert your form to a web server. And I think PHP and web servers would be a good third book for Duckett, because he could talk about how you use PHP code and how to convert that to a web server. You could even do PHP and C++, because C+ is used to make code games. So, and he does have a book on how to code games. So he can make a third book. I'd buy it because he does a good job at what he does. And then my brother got me the Learning Web Design book for Christmas, and then I got a new book recently, PHP for the Web. It's got a bunny rabbit on it. It's by Laura Ullman, and it teaches you some PHP code for registering forms. There's a feature, HTML to script convert, and on Apple it lets you convert HTML to JavaScript, Perl, PHP, Java, and I think Ruby or Python. So you get a basic understanding of how those languages write code, but it takes all your HTML code and it converts it to that language. So if I sent you some JavaScript code of what our homepage looks like in HTML, I'm guessing you have enough of an understanding to figure out how JavaScript worked.
Yeah, if you sent me a side by side, I'd probably be able to figure it out. All you really have to do is learn, what this means is compared to this, and what this means is compared to this. It's just a compare and contrast at that point.
Yeah. So there's like source code for different things, but let's watch Laquan Treadwell. We've been putting our audience off on the Laquan Treadwell anticipation, so
yeah, we put them to sleep. Don't worry, I've been trying to make business deals where we're at it, so it's not like anything's gone to waste. The
Samsung iPhone battle. I want to know who wins the iPhone battle. Well, the first phone won the iPhone battle, or are they comparing a Samsung to an iPhone here, hoping
Samsung to an iPhone.
Yeah.
Because the Samsung has this cool new feature to where instead of plugging your phone in, if you don't have a plug near, you've got this little charger plate where you just set the darn phone down the plate.
Laquan Treadwell is number one. No, that's his actual number. He's not actually the number one receiver in this draft. Depends on who you're asking, though. So, okay, he's lined up on the outside. I think he did a good job blocking to allow one of his other receivers to get open and catch the ball. That time he caught a pass on the outside at the flanker. Now he's in the number 2 receiver. I think that's the X receiver, or is this the Z? I don't know.
The Z is the slot. The X is up top. It's XYZ. X, Y on the outside, and Z
and Y on the right.
Well, depending on the offense, yes.
I think it depends on what hand the quarterback throws with, too, because if he's a left-handed quarterback, then it's reverse.
Yeah, I know some X receivers can line up on both sides, depending. I know Devontae Parker was an X, and he lined up on both sides, depending on what the play called for in the formation.
Yep.
So.
And Treadwell, I see a good blocking receiver. He can pass block and run block. Even when cornerbacks jam him and use press coverage, he's a guy that can make some plays happen. He got a little too physical there, having a Ron Artest moment on the gridiron.
Oh, please. That's nothing compared to the Steelers back in the 70s. There he's lined up in the X. Or no, he was lined up in the Z on that one. Sorry.
Well, I haven't seen any plays with him in the slot yet. So I see a guy that can play on the outside, and he made a good catch. He made it. Defender miss a tackle because he's got agility, speed. He's got that ability to get yards after the catch.
Yeah, he's lining up a couple different places as well. So you also got to look at things he can do there. And we know he can block without the ball, but how good is he as a distraction?
Yeah, I mean these Boise State corners are calling the right plays, like the defensive coordinator. Because one play he's playing man against Treadwell, the next play he's playing zone when Treadwell goes deep, and I think that definitely helped Boise State out. Is the defensive coordinator calling the right schemes at the right times. Treadwell wants to go deep, you call a cover 2 play, you take him out of the game. He wants to go with a short medium pass, you go medium pass, you play man. You limit his ability. He wants to go with a short pass, you put press coverage on him. And it's like rock, paper, scissors. So press coverage beats short passes. Man coverage beats medium passes. And zone coverage beats deep passes. It's like rock, paper, scissors in the receiver versus defensive back matchup. Now, if you're playing press and the guy goes deep, it's going to result in a big gain if he catches the ball. But it also depends on the receiver's route running. That's not just the sole factor. Now, I haven't seen the best route running from Treadwell, but there are a few plays where he uses his route running. I think this guy relies a lot on his speed. He can catch the ball if he's in the right place at the right time, but I see a guy that's relying a lot on his speed at this point. There he did a good job of breaking away from the defenseman. And there he's in the slot again, Joey.
Yeah. And, I mean, when you're in the slot, have you seen them do any end arounds with him? Whether it be a short one from the slot or all the way around for a full reverse.
I see blocking and speed from Treadwell. Those are the only two things I've seen on tape, and maybe the versatility to play the X, Y, or Z receiver roles. I mean, he can catch the ball if he's in the right place, but I haven't seen the best route running. He can make a defender miss if he has enough space, and he can get some yards after the catch. Treadwell, there he's playing. The corners play press, but he adjusted to man. It's the same things, so.
Yeah. And he's aggressive. I like that he's aggressive. But, you know, I'm seeing a lot of raw route running. I mean, he doesn't run routes particularly well. And that could knock his draft stock.
Yeah, I mean, Terry Mario, our writer at Draft Utopia, he made a mock draft. I think it was a 3-round mock draft, the same one that just like my cousin Will did, and he had Laquan Treadwell originally going 5 to Tampa Bay before he adjusted that and realized, well, that's a terrible selection because Buccaneers already have Vince Jackson and Mike Evans. But
now there was a pretty good flag,
jumping.
I think it was.
Finally saw some jumping once Treadwell got into the red zone.
Yeah. I think 2 plays ago, that was a flag that he ran, and that was a really good flag route. I mean, to the outside. It wasn't as close to the sideline as I'm used to seeing with that, where you use the sideline to make sure that the defender can't get to the ball. But it was a good route nonetheless.
I mean, I see mainly blocking and jump. I saw one play where he jumped in the red zone. I didn't really see much after that. So,
yeah, it was the play before. I didn't see any plays. I think I saw some. I saw that flag, and I saw a slant, I think it was, maybe 2 slants. Everything else was, when it came to routes, it was almost straight downfield.
So Laramie Tunsil got injured twice, and Laquan Treadwell got put on IR after the 9th game of the season. Or maybe Tunsil only got injured in the bowl game, and then this guy got injured in the 8th or 9th game of the season. I can't remember, but we'll look that up at a later date. But for now, I'm just going to assume that Tunsil got injured twice and that Treadwell got injured after that 8th or 9th game as well. So if Treadwell and Tunsil were both injured after the 8th or 9th game and the team was 7-0 or 8-0, and they lose both of those players for the rest of the year, guess what? They're probably going to lose because those are their 2 biggest players on offense, even though they came back at the end of the year.
Yeah, and there are only so many players you can lose. I like to say it's not the quantity of the players or the people that you have, it's the quality. But after a while, even if you have quality players, sheer numbers are going to catch up to you. So if you lose quality, the quality players you have, it's not going to turn out well in your favor.
Absolutely. So I'm looking to see if there's any more Laquan Treadwell tape. It was still on Robert Nikdimski, so if I type in Laquan Treadwell highlights, maybe we'll get some tape. And then after that, we can talk about what we learned from each player today, and we'll wrap this up. Sophomore highlights, freshman highlights, career highlights, injury, Laquan Treadwell injury. I'm just trying to figure out what we'd watch. 2013 freshman highlights. He was named the freshman of the year, so we could actually watch both of these highlights that Grant Wiley posted. And they're both 3-minute, 6-minute highlight reels, so that's good. We'll be able to see if he regressed or improved as a freshman, and then we'll call it a day after what we've learned from the highlights.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it goes to what did we learn last year about Dak Prescott. I watched film from his sophomore year, redshirt sophomore year. I watched film from his sophomore redshirt year, and I watched it all consecutively throughout the day, and you could just see each game. Every 2 or 3 games, you could see the difference in his form, in his mechanics, in ball placement. And I think as the season goes on, this is why I don't put a bunch of information on my player profiles as soon as I put them out, is because as the season goes on, if you watch straight in a row, you can literally see players who can make strong progression. You can just watch it back to back to back, and you can see everything that's happening. And so I think, so as the season goes on, we are going to learn a lot more about these guys simply by being able to take that tape and just watch it straight through.
Yeah, I mean, Treadwell, most of his plays, he's showing a lot more explosion from his freshman tape so far, but at the same time, a lot of his passes are screen passes. He had that one good pass at the beginning where he ran like a solid slant route, but most of these plays are screen passes.
Yeah, and with this, you have to remember, if most of the plays are screen passes, they can't do screen passes 100% of the time. So when that means it's like with, I'm going to go back to Nick Foles again because I'm never going to live down how great that scouting report was. He threw a lot of screen passes. So when he did throw deep, when he did throw intermediate, everything that's done, if like Treadwell, he goes a lot of screen stuff, or deep stuff. Whenever he runs a route, that's going to be under the microscope. It's like, okay, we know he can do this. He does it often. But then when he does this, guess what? We're going to take into account. We're going to put a number on it. How many of them he runs? When does he run them? We're going to go back and watch it again. And then we're going to break that down. Then we're going to break it down again because he doesn't run much of this. So those are going to be those plays are going to be under the microscope. And so you have to remember that. When it comes to this, those plays where he does have to run those different types of, when he has to run a shift, when he has to run more than a slant, when he has, like that play we saw in the last film where he ran that flag, those things are going to be under the microscope. We know he's athletic, we know he's aggressive, but there's a lot more to it, and we're going to have, and you just have to remember, keep it under the microscope when he does something else.
Absolutely. And with Laquan Treadwell, you saw him, he catches more passes on this tape that are effective. He's making defenders miss. He's doing more during his freshman season than he did during the sophomore tape. And I'm not sure if playing next to Dante Moncrief, who got drafted by the Colts and who I thought was a first-round receiver at the time, because I was a huge Laquan Treadwell fan heading into the 2013 or 2014 NFL draft. And my impression with Treadwell, with Dante Moncrief, was he caught 10 touchdowns leading up to that junior year. He returned for his senior year, and I thought he was a first-round pick because he showed that complete ability. But teams started double-teaming him, and Treadwell arrived as a freshman, so that really caused teams to take his ability into account.
Yeah, and I will give you credit for the Moncrief, because you were riding this guy's jock for a year, and everybody was saying, no, he's a second or third round pick. You had him up there in the first round. Yeah, so I will give you credit. You hit that one on the head when it came to Moncrief. So that could definitely be a big part of what he was able to do as a freshman. So huge props to you on that.
Thank you. And you were right about Nick Foles.
Yep, thank you. Right there, you love his body control on that.
Against Alabama, the game where they upset the Crimson Tide, one-handed catch shows that spectacular catch ability. He can catch in traffic. I think there was one play where he was double-teamed by Alabama. No question his best game came against Alabama.
Yeah.
Again, he jumped air.
Yeah, right there. Yeah, it wasn't the greatest route, but it was a good enough route to be effective. Yeah, it's plays like that's going to be under the microscope.
There he
right there. Yeah, loved the extra effort. He could have gone down. He made that extra leap. That extra effort to get into the end zone. Gotta love it, and love the way he breaks through the edges. Shows that athleticism, as you were just talking about. That was a good route. That was a good route.
Look at him. He's motivational, too. Like, he's standing up there excited, and the rest of the team's responding to his authority.
Yeah. And, that is – and you go look at that one after the catch. He had room on the sidelines he could have gone to. I know a lot of players would have gone to that. He went straight back inside, got the touchdown. I like the way in that one that he found the crease. Those things, the simplest of plays. You just run straight down the crease, you sit in an open spot, and you let your quarterback do the rest.
That last throw was actually kind of cool because Laramie Tunsil blew his blocking assignment. He catches the ball because he sees Bo Wallace, and he uses some route running to get in some yards after he catches the ball. Most receivers run routes before they catch the ball, but he did some route running after he caught the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that there, that aggression. That's something I always looked at. like you said, route running after the ball. It's what we like to call finish. They talk about offensive linemen finishing the play. This is a receiver finishing the play. You catch the ball.
Now he's blocking like David DeCastro.
Yeah, I mean, it's finishing the play. Whether you're running a route, your quarterback scrambling, you're blocking. Guess what? That quarterback, he gets his head knocked off, and you're standing there. You're not going to be well received in the locker room. You go, you finish the play, you finish the block, you catch the ball, you keep running, because I know a lot of receivers will stop after. It's like, that's not finishing the play. You catch the ball, and you keep going. You keep running that route after you catch that ball. You stay with it. You make adjustments as you need to after you have the ball, but you don't stop. You continue the play. I mean, and that's a lot of things younger players don't do. I think he has a good head on his shoulders. I think he's a little bit strapped with how the offense works. I think right now he is a solid mid to late first round prospect, maybe early second round prospect. I think, but because of what I have seen here with the combined 3 tape, the first tape just didn't show me a lot. Second tape showed me a little bit more. I like this last one, good. You saw a lot from this last one. I like what we saw. I still don't think he's the best route runner. I think he's going to take at least a year in a pro system to get the route running down. But he does enough right that I think he can make an impact early for a team.
Absolutely. And with this, I just think that with his ability, I'm going to go back to disabling screen share, and I'm going to go back to – but with what we've seen today with Laquan Treadwell, I think we saw a guy that has ability to be a first-round pick. And it's funny, I see Walter Football's 2016 mock draft, and he's got him in the top half of the draft. USA Today has Treadwell listed as the second best receiver, 20th overall in my magazine here. And it's too early to evaluate these players. I'm just trying to watch as much tape as I can, digest as much football knowledge as possible so that when I do my player ranking write-ups, it'll be a lot easier to generate a conclusion for my before 2014 stats. So that way I don't just have the stats and the numbers and the production, which Charlie Campbell does an awesome job with. I actually have some things I can add on to that. And with Laquan Treadwell, I see a guy that he's making those plays, he's getting open, he's creating separation. He might not be the most disciplined route runner, but I didn't see one play on the tape where he dropped the ball. I didn't see one play where he dropped the ball. He caught every ball that was thrown to him.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. It's when I was coaching, it's like I always told my receivers, you have 2 jobs. Get open and catch a goddamn football. When he goes around like that, and he is able to catch everything. You catch everything that goes with you. You might not be able to run routes that well, but you catch the football, you're going to make a lot of coaches happy. Are you still there?
It didn't. It's working again.
Okay, I was going to say I just got this picture of you that looked really angry there for a second, and I'm like, yeah, this is not a good screenshot for you. So that really stopped at an awkward position. But back to what I was saying, you catch the football, you're going to make a lot of coaches happy. And as a coach, we think we can teach this kid to run routes, to have the kind of concentration to catch everything that's thrown at you. Now that is, we're a bunch of freaking egomaniacs, and we think we could teach anybody anything. At the same time, it's a lot harder to teach somebody concentration than it is to put them through route running for, 6 hours a day to teach them this route.
Absolutely. And this draft isn't going to be as strong at receiver as the 2015 one. There's going to be a few good ones. There's going to be a guy from Tennessee. I think Cameron Sutter's the cornerback, but I know they have a guy on offense at wide receiver. I know that Colorado State has a guy. I just checked the magazine. They got a guy from Colorado State who's listed as the #1 overall receiver in this draft. There's Tyler Boyd, the Pittsburgh Panthers wide receiver, that he looks like a top 10 pick. He kind of reminds me of Santana Moss. So there are a few good ones in this draft, but clearly there's not the amount of depth that you had in the last 2 drafts at receiver. It's stronger than 2013, but not as strong as 2014 or 2015.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to spend I think when it came to the receivers in 2015, I think we spent 4 weeks discussing not only the top of the draft, but the middle, the end, and just all the receivers we had there. I don't think we're going to get that in. I don't think we're going to have to spend that much time discussing wide receiver this year.
Yeah, and USA Today only has 2 receivers going. I know Walt's NFL drafts have at least 4, so I'm going to go out on a limb and say 3 go in the first round. I'll compromise and meet both of them, because I think 2 receivers in the first round in today's NFL is just too little. There's going to be at least 3 receivers in every NFL draft for the next few years. I don't know if there will be 4 or 5 every year, but I can guarantee you there will probably be at least 3 receivers taken in the first round every year, simply because of the demand at the position and because of the value some of these college players provide.
Yeah, and you also have to look at, there are a lot of these guys that were stars. In the last few years, we've had a few retirements, which, we're used to that. Stars retire all the time. But what we're getting at now is, here about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, we had a huge run on wide receivers. We had the Boldens, the Fitzgeralds, the Calvin Johnsons. We had, between 8 and 11 years ago, we had this huge run on wide receivers. These guys are getting up there in age now. There are some of these guys that are taking steps back. We just recently saw Hines Ward just say, I'm pretty much done at this point. We're going to be seeing these guys in the next few years, the Andre Johnsons, the Calvin Johnsons, the Fitzgerald, the Boldens. We're going to be seeing all these guys who have been so good for so long, which basically turned back the need for a receiver. We're going to see these guys go. So for the next few years, you're going to be looking for maybe not replacements immediately, but replacements in the next year or 2. I mean, the Cardinals hit early with Michael Floyd, and they've been taking the approach of refueling periodically. But some of these teams that aren't, and that are waiting until these guys retire or die or whatever they're going to do on the field at this point, you're going to see this position need to be replenished in the NFL. So while there are some teams, Rex Ryan teams, the Browns, and some of these teams who are going, the Rams right now, these teams that are going to revitalize and bring back the running back position, bring value back to that, but you're still going to have to replenish the receiver position for all the retirements. And because of that, I still believe you're going to see more wide receivers taken than any other position that needs revitalized in the next few years.
Absolutely. And I mean, I guess I'm wrong about corners, because I said that Claiborne and Kirkpatrick would both be Pro Bowlers. But in 2012, I said that Michael Floyd would end up having a better career than Justin Blackmon. And I just thought Justin Blackmon was going to bust, and other receivers like Alshon Jeffrey, Mohamed Sanu, those guys were going to become Pro Bowlers as well as Floyd, but I thought Floyd could have been the best of the bunch, and I thought it would be either Floyd or Jeffrey that turned out to be the best receiver in this draft. And those two would be the Pro Bowlers that stood out from that receiver class. I don't think it's as strong as 2012, but I think this is stronger than 2013. And with 2013, I thought DeAndre Hopkins was the best receiver in that draft. It's too early to say, but it looks like I might be right on that one. And I liked Moncrief in 2014. I thought he should have been a first-round guy. I was also high on Jordan Matthews of the Eagles. So I was high on both those guys. So I do an okay job with evaluating receivers. Now, cornerbacks might be a different story because I thought Darqueze Dennard would have been the best corner in that draft. I thought him and Justin Gilbert were both Pro Bowlers, and they both disappointed in their rookie season. So
yeah, and something about Gilbert. They say his problems as a rookie were his immaturity, and something that happened during the offseason was Joe Hayden said, "Come here, rookie, you're coming with me." And Gilbert stayed, I don't know if he stayed at the same house or not, but stayed in the area and worked out with Joe Hayden. And Mike Pettin said that with Gilbert, it was a 180 turnaround from this time last year because, they said Gilbert always had the attitude in the film room, but he just thought his natural ability would carry him on the field. So, if with Hayden basically saying, "Come here, rookie, you're not screwing up again," I think, well, that shows leadership on Hayden's part. You might not be wrong on Gilbert at this point yet. So don't try to say that one was a bust pick before it happened. The
reason I believe that is simply because they had another corner, Kevion Webster or somebody, who was the boundary corner, and Gilbert often played the nickel. And with the signing of Tramon Williams, the guy who was the number 2 corner on the Browns next year will most likely move to the nickel, and Gilbert will most likely move to the dime corner next to Joe Hayden. Now, since he's playing next to Hayden instead of across from him, I doubt the Browns will use any dimes packages, but when they do, and he's playing next to Joe Hayden, he's probably going to make some plays simply because Joe Hayden will be communicating with him. He'll be like, "Hey, rookie, remember when we hung out last year? We were watching tape. You're going to do this and this." And because he's communicating with Hayden, he's going to get better as a result of that.
Yeah, and the thing about K'Wan Williams, which was the guy you were discussing, they actually ran quite a few dime packages when it was Screen, Hayden, and Williams, simply to get Williams on the field. Something that Mike Pettin, you'll look at and you'll say, he loves his rush linebackers. I'm willing to bet you he loves his cornerbacks more than he does anything else on that roster. If you give him 4 cornerbacks that can all make plays, I wouldn't doubt if he switched to a 46 defense, simply say, "I want these guys all on the field. I want every blasted one of them, and I'll run a 4-2-6 or a 4-1-6 or whatever else I have to run to get these guys on the field. I'll use Williams as a blitzer. I don't care." That's his mentality as a defensive coach, because he ran a lot of 4-corner sets early in the season when he was trying to get Gilbert into the mix. He was never able to get Gilbert into the mix. Gilbert was, when he got a chance to start, he didn't do very well starting either. So, so when you're looking at that, it's like, if they have talent, if they could go 4 deep at corner, they will get all 4 of them on the field. they will find a way because, Pettin will make sure that he can get corners on the field above all else, and he'll find other ways to get a pass rush.
That's true. They could go in that direction. And the reason I think they could go in that direction, you mentioned that Justin Gilbert might not be a bust yet. Well, he played mostly the nickel, and I'm not sure if Buster Skrine was the number 2 corner or Williams was. I think Williams was the number 2 corner.
Skrine was the number 2, and when Skrine got injured, Williams stepped into the number 2 and performed admirably.
So, yeah. So Gilbert was the nickel, I think, the entire season because he was ahead of Williams on the depth chart at the point. I think he may have been the boundary corner for the first game of the season, but then he did terrible. Or Skrine was the number 2 corner and Gilbert was in the nickel. And then the Browns were afraid of putting Gilbert in the number 2 corner role during his rookie season. So they took a conservative approach and put Williams in. He did well, and he surpassed Gilbert on the depth chart as a result. And now you bring in Tramon Williams, who is a number 1 corner with Green Bay, but he's getting up there in age. He'll go to a number 2 corner role, and you're demoting Williams to the nickel and Gilbert to the dime. So Gilbert was the number 2 corner in the preseason, but then he got bumped down to the nickel corner because Buster Skrine seemed a little more prepared. He got injured. They bring Williams in because they want to keep Gilbert in that nickel role because in the first game against the Steelers when Skrine was the number 2 corner, Gilbert struggled on a few plays. So now he'll be in a dime corner role. He'll be next to Joe Hayden on some dime packages, and if he gets better from that as a result, he could eventually become a number 2 corner again just because he's playing next to Hayden, and that makes him better.
Yeah, and you also have to look at when it comes to Williams, as you said, Williams is getting up there in age, and right now he's not quite as good in coverage as he used to be. But one thing he brings over Skrine was good in coverage, but Skrine was the most penalized cornerback. I forget whether it was cornerback or defensive back in the NFL this last year. And he was huge with whenever he didn't get beat as often, but whenever he did get beat, he would hold. He would have pass interference penalties, and even if you don't get beat that often, that adds up. And you won't have that with Williams. So even if, Gibson has to, and DeJuan Williams switch, you're going to have Tramon Williams over there. So you're going to have another veteran that doesn't commit a lot of penalties who can say, look, you go in this area, you do this. So I think in a way, with Skrine, Skrine he wasn't as much of a liability last year. He improved last year, but he's not that guy you want telling young guys, you do this. Tramon Williams is. So right there you have 2 guys who can tell these young kids, do this, and you can develop in this direction. So that's something that you had to look at as a reason for that move. And I think for that you would pay. They say they overpaid Tramon Williams. Well, if you look at it, may not have been much of an overpayment if that's what you want to get over.
Well, Buster Skrine's going to move to a nickel corner role with the Jets, which probably suits him better because you got Revis and Cromartie as your top 2 corners on that depth chart once again, like they did when they made those 2 runs to the AFC Championship. So now you'll have those guys back on your roster, and Buster Skrine will be inside at the nickel role. I mean, D. Milner could play, but they gave Skrine too much money not to have him in a nickel role. So I think he'll be in that role.
Yeah, D. Milner, I have heard mixed reports. I heard that the coaching staff they're pretty satisfied with him. And then I've heard unconfirmed reports that they're pretty ticked off with him. He's not developing from what he was. He got hurt, and then after he got hurt, it was whatever, and he completely stopped progressing. So, and coaches and office people are kind of getting frustrated with that. And that's why they went out and they were going to get the big 2 guys, Cromartie and Revis, regardless. But that's the reason they went out and got a screener. Like, this kid isn't developing. He's not doing anything. He's just what he is. And that doesn't fit into what we want.
That's so true. And I think the fact that he's in that position now might help him long term. But we've watched tape of all three Ole Miss players, and we spent way too much time talking about these corners and players we've seen in the past drafts on tape. So I'm going to mention what I learned about each of the Ole Miss players. You can mention what you learned, and that will be it for today. And then I'll talk about what I might watch on Monday, assuming you're at work. So what I learned was that Laramie Tunsil, I don't think he's as good as the media is making him out to be. The durability issues could be a concern. He run blocks like William Beatty. He zone blocks like Trent Williams. His pass blocking is inconsistent. Sometimes you see DeBrickashaw Ferguson. Other times you see Michael Orr. I mean, even though he's got good blocking in terms of pass blocking, run blocking, he doesn't have the pass blocking strength and run blocking strength that you look for. His pass blocking footwork can be good at times, but his footwork as a run blocker and pass blocker is pretty inconsistent. But there are times where he can display outstanding footwork, and sometimes has really bad footwork. So his footwork's about as consistent as his pass blocking, which isn't very consistent at all. So I think that's an interesting scenario. And you said you like Jack Conklin better than this guy, so I think that's really going to be interesting to see how that develops. Robert Nakimdish. This guy was actually better than Joey Bosa based off the tape we saw. He had rip moves. He had swim moves. He showed he could get by triple teams. We saw him dominate against SEC competition. He said block shedding. I mean, the guy had burst off the edge. There were other things to like about him as well. So I think that Robert Nakimdish is going to be the challenger to Joey Bosa. I think the Jaguars are going to end up with a top pick, and it's going to be a three-way race between Sean Oakman, Nakimdish, and Joey Bosa. I know Bosa has to be the front runner because Ohio State won the championship and he had 13 sacks. But when I started this series on Monday, I saw Joey Bosa relied a lot on his agility and his swim moves. He doesn't display rip moves or the power and strength that you'd like to see him make coming off blocks. And that's a red flag if you ask me. It's not a big red flag because he can do everything else. He can drop back into coverage. He can blitz the quarterback. He can stop the run. If he gets by the offensive line, he's going to make a big play that results in either a tackle for a loss or a sack or a hurry. So you love that Bosa can do those things. But at the same time, he has to use his swim moves. So if you force him to make a rip move like Oregon did in their first series against the Ohio State in the college football playoff, you can make Bosa obsolete and take him out of the game. And finally, with Laquan Treadwell, I saw a guy that could catch everything, make all of those big plays. He never dropped a pass. He showed good speed, displayed excellent blocking for a receiver. But he needs to work on his route running. That has to become more consistent this year. I'd like to see him jump on a few more plays, but he's acrobatic enough to make a catch in traffic in order to use his athleticism. He's fast enough and he's agile enough with his footwork to make a defender miss a tackle. And there's a lot of things to like about him, but at the same time, he relies on the screen pass and the deep pass and the vertical passing game in order to get open. And if he's in the right place at the right time when the quarterback's throwing, he'll catch the ball. He might not be consciously aware of the routes he's running, but he'll catch the ball. He'll reel it in with his hands or with his body, and he'll make a big play. So, and most of his catches were with his hands rather than his body, so that's a good sign too. Because if a player relies on his body to make the catches, you hit him hard enough, they'll drop the ball. So the fact that he can catch the ball with just his hands, you like that about him as well. So that's what I learned about Laquan Treadwell. He's a top 20 guy like USA Today has him, but I don't think he's the top 10 or top 15 guy that sites like Walter Football are making him out to be. So that's just my 2 cents on those guys. I think these guys, except for Nakimdish, are rated a little too high on the draft boards. Tunsil and Treadwell are ranked a little higher than they should be on the draft boards. But at the same time, these are all first-round talents. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. When it comes to people have to understand when it comes to top 10 picks. I know I said this on the podcast once or twice, but if you're going to take somebody in the top 10, if you're going to rank them in top 10, you had better be 1,000% sure these guys are going to be stars. When you look at Tunsil, good, I see a high ceiling, a good floor, not a great floor, not a low floor. He'll most likely be a good, solid pro from what we saw in these tapes. But he has a chance to be a very good pro. I do not see a surefire 100% this guy is going to be the big difference maker. And if you can't see that, it's like, then he's probably not a top 10 guy. He's not somebody you would want in your top 10 if you do not believe he's going to be that guy. Same thing with Treadwell. Athletic, aggressive, great hands. He needs to learn his routes. I like his body control. That's something I can never stress enough when it comes, especially receivers with a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism, when they get downfield. The body control, because that quarterback's going to throw that ball up. You have to be able to locate the ball. Great. There's part one. You located the ball. Those cornerbacks are going to jump with you. That ball is not going to be in the perfect place every time. You're going to have to be able to make maybe a one-handed catch against your chest. You're going to have to contort your body a little bit. You're going to have to be able to move your arms against their body. When you go up, they're going to be hitting you in the arms. They're going to be hitting. You're going to have to position your body a lot of times in the air. You're going to have that body control. He's got good body control. I think he could slip into the top 10 at some point. I do not think he's there yet. He needs to work a little bit. He's got to get, right now, his route running is, every now and then he'll come up with a great route. But for the most part, he's straight downfield. Take your slant, find the seam. Those are skills of a good tight end. Yeah, he's got to get his route running in order, or else he's going to be a good mid-first round pick, maybe early 20s. He's not going to be that top 10 guy you want. The big winner, as you said, the big Russian, Nemditsky, or however you pronounce the name, he's dominant, he's versatile, he needs refinement. I mean, there are times when I discussed it when we were watching the tape. He'd be going against an offensive lineman, their arms would be straight, and his hands would be trying to whack the creases of the elbow. Well, guess what? You just strengthened that offensive lineman's position. Congratulations. You have to know where to hit him. He has straight arms. Good. If nothing else, you hit him, knock his arms away from the inside if you want to go inside. If you want to go outside, knock him away from the outside. You want a bull rush, get those hands up there, spread them. You have somebody with straight arms, they have no strength in their arms. The footwork. You got to be, after you knock the hands away, you got to be able to get that first step inside. I love his first step. I think he needs refinement, but overall, I think he is excellent. I think this could turn into one of the best top 5 to top 10 for linemen, not linemen who could play rush linebacker, strictly people on the line in the next few years, and I think he's one of the guys that are going to be leading that pack.
Absolutely. And one more thing before I talk about Monday's show is I wanted to compare the guys to the 2014 draft, where they would have been drafted had they gone pro in 2014. With Tunsil, I think he's not as good as Brandon Scherf, but he's better than Erek Flowers, and he's better. He's just as good as he's better than Andres Pete as a run blocker, but he's worse than Andres Pete in pass protection. But I think he's better than Erek Flowers overall. So had he been eligible this year, I think he probably would have been the second offensive tackle taken after Scherf, because Scherf was just that spectacular on the tape. And I think you can justify taking Brandon Scherf ahead of this guy. I don't know. I think this guy would be probably the second player picked after those offensive tackles, but this year he has a chance to be the first offensive tackle taken. But it's going to come down to how those other guys do. Jack Conklin, Spencer Drago out of Baylor, Taylor Decker, Ohio State. There are other offensive tackles in this draft. Ronnie Stanley, Notre Dame. Again, there are other offensive tackles, and I loved what I saw from Stanley on tape, and I think Stanley is probably going to be my number one offensive tackle when I do my rankings, simply because of what I saw from Tunsil, or a lack of. And I thought we were going to see a complete top 5 offensive tackle with Tunsil. I didn't see that. I think Stanley could be that guy when I watch Ronnie Stanley's tape later, but I don't think he's that guy. With Laquan Treadwell, there was just so much depth in this draft. Him being a sophomore was a blessing in disguise, because if he was a junior and he announced his intentions to go pro, he probably would have been a 3rd or 4th round pick, simply because of the lack of route running he showed. Because this draft was loaded at receiver. It's nothing against him. It's just the fact that this draft was loaded at receiver, and there were a ton of good route runners in this draft. So the fact that he lacked experience as a route runner would have pushed him down to the 3rd or 4th round if he had been eligible for this year's draft in 2015. Now, with Nick Kimdish, he has a chance to be better than every defensive lineman drafted in 2015. And I really believe that. Maybe not Vic Beasley, but I think everybody else, Leonard Williams, Dante Fowler, I think he has a chance to be better than all of them, depending on what he does. And I could say the same thing for Joey Bosa and Sean Oakman, but we're going to see what those 3 defensive ends do and how they play in 2015, because I think all of them have a chance to be better than the 2015 defensive ends that were drafted. But we got to see what these guys can do on tape in 2015. That's really going to be vital. Anything you'd like to add to that?
You have to remember, if you look at Nimdinsky, if you look at Oakman, and you look at Bosa, who is the least aggressive defensive lineman there? Bosa has the least aggression, something I hit on earlier. He doesn't have that huge, larger-than-life mentality that comes along with his style of play. So when you look at these two guys, Oakman, Nimdinsky, they have that. I look at that. I saw Nimdinsky. He got up after that first step on that first play. This guy's got some presence to him. This guy looks like a stud. He looks like a star. Oakman carries the same thing. Bosa doesn't come across watching him as the guy who comes across that way. He doesn't come across as a star. He comes across as an incredibly skilled player, an incredibly skilled athlete. He doesn't. I've tried to watch him. I'm like, let's find Bosa. Let's find Bosa. These guys I don't have to try to find. These guys stand out. So Bosa's going to have to. I think Bosa has the skill to be right there with these guys from a skill level. But right now, I think he may end up running third, basically because everybody knows his skill. He doesn't incite fear. He doesn't make you, right now, with what he's had around him, they aren't making the game plan around him. These guys, they make game plans around. So we're going to have to look and see how he adapts that. Is he going to gain in his last year at the U? Is he going to gain that, larger than life mentality? If he does, this could be a very interesting draft coming up on the defensive line, which with the talent that's there between those 3 guys, that could be a very interesting top 5 you're looking at. probably completely unpredictable. So I'm going to be looking at that heavy. Tunsil. Right now, I think he's the third or fourth prospect in this draft class. Okay. So I want to
fourth overall or fourth among offensive tackles?
Third, at least third among offensive tackles. Conklin and Stanley, I think, are ahead of him right now. So I'm looking because I've watched a lot of tape on those two. Highly skilled, a lot of upside. Two different games, two different types of players. I think Tunsil is somewhere in the middle of those two guys. But at the same time, those guys don't have problems with injuries. They're not injury prone. They don't have the inconsistency with the game. They have their game. They know their game. They work well to their strengths. They don't have the inconsistencies with them. They have room to grow, but they stick to what they do best. Will they grow? If not, Tunsil could slip right in there. So right now he's probably third in the class. As of now, I want to see him stay healthy, and I want to see him get his inconsistencies together. I want, you don't have to make them into a strength. Just make sure they're not a weakness. So, if he can do that, once again, same thing with the defensive linemen, the offensive tackles, and that three, that can make it a very interesting top five. And we haven't even factored in the quarterback situation, because this could be a very interesting top 10 if you factor in the quarterbacks. So, and with Treadwell, I think he would have been a second-round pick this year, honestly. Last year. This year, I've already given my opinion on this year. I haven't really looked heavy into the wide receivers this year. I think he could be, that big guy that everybody looks for, but he could also be just another athletic guy. He could be without the Doro Green Beckham type athlete, without all of the off the field baggage, which would still get him a top 15 pick, but he wouldn't be top 10. So, I mean, it's still really early to tell with these guys. But at the same time, it's going to be exciting to watch.
It certainly is. And you mentioned the quarterbacks for a second, and I was about to wrap up. But you mentioned the quarterbacks. I watched some of the quarterbacks on tape on Tuesday, and the thing I noticed was Jared Goff was a guy that, but I forgot to put screen share on Tuesday. But I was watching the quarterbacks, and the thing I noticed here was Cardale Jones was making throws. All of his throws were out of a shotgun offense. Christian Hackenberg, he had throws out of a balanced run-first offense, a West Coast offense, a pro-style offense, and Hackenberg was making NFL throws under Bill O'Brien and James Franklin's offenses at Penn State. Even though he regressed under James Franklin, the former Vanderbilt head coach, he was still making NFL throws. So I'm definitely looking at that, and there were a lot of completions and big plays, 30-yard passes. He threw 15 interceptions, 12 touchdowns that cost Penn State some wins, but they were in a lot of football games because of his play at quarterback. Connor Cook, he's a guy that lacked accuracy on some of his throws. He displayed a lot of inconsistent accuracy and his arm strength. I don't think he's as good as people are making him out to be. I think he's going to be the Brady Quinn of this draft. I really do. I mean, a lot of people have him as the number one player on their mock drafts, but he's going to be the guy that falls off the map, and he slides to some team at 19 or 20 that barely misses the playoffs and needs a quarterback. Let's say a team like the Kansas City Chiefs or the Dallas Cowboys is on the outside of the playoffs looking in, maybe even the Houston Texans. They'll draft Connor Cook as a backup, wait a year or two to develop him, and then they'll bring him in as a starter. That's what I think is going to happen with him. And the fourth quarterback, who's one of my favorites, is Jared Goff. Has the best arm in the draft. Good arm strength, back-to-back seasons of 3,500 passing yards. Reminds me of Aaron Rodgers because he can play in a pro-style offense, just like Connor Cook and Christian Hackenberg. But at the same time, he has trouble with progressions. Connor Cook made some progressions, sure, He didn't have the he was inconsistent with his arm strength. He was inconsistent with his accuracy. But Connor Cook made good progressions. I mean, he was able to do that, even though he had less than 3,500 passing yards and a lot of inconsistent accuracy on tape with his throws. Connor Cook was still able to make those progressions. Jared Goff can't do that, which makes you wonder if he's going to be another Brett Hundley. So there's that concern. So each of these quarterbacks has a knock to his game, but Hackenberg can make all the NFL throws, which is why I think he's the best prospect among those four quarterbacks at this time.
Yeah, right now I've got at the top of my quarterback ranking, I've got Dak Prescott. He is able to do most everything, but the thing about him that stood out to me was how quick he can learn, how quick he can progress. He is incredibly smart. And he's got the physical talent to make it work. And if he continues to progress, he came back, even though he doesn't have to take a class. He was a redshirt freshman, so he's redshirted. He could have come out as a junior, there were people pushing him to come out as a junior. He stayed. He knew he needed further refinement. So he's very self-aware in that respect. He's not chasing the money. So you look at that. Dak Prescott, is a guy who I've been saying for a year could emerge as the guy in this one. And I still think right now he may be. Connor Cook, I like him. I think, but right now, he's got that presence. The same way Kirk Cousins did, he's got that presence, something that they teach at Michigan State. He's a leader, he's a really good player. I think right now, hey, he's a little bit better than Andy Dalton. I think he could be a little bit better than Andy Dalton was coming out. And hell, Andy Dalton starts. Andy Dalton's a starting quarterback in the NFL. He just got a $100 million contract. So you got to look, Cook may not get drafted top 5, top 10, unless, somebody like Cardell Jones doesn't step up. John Robertson doesn't step up. So, he could be taken early, but I'd say I'm with you. He'd most likely be taken anywhere from 20 to 35 in the mid to late first round up until the early second round, So I'm looking at that with Connor Cook. Cardell Jones right now is the wild card. You can say whatever you want. He doesn't have as many games under his belt. He's a big dude, but at the same time, he has got so little refinement in his game. He has a lot to learn. So what can he learn between last year and this upcoming year that's going to make us say, Raw is great. Raw we can teach. Raw is a mid to late round prospect. What is he going to show us that's going to make us say, he's up there with Connor Cook. He's up there with Robertson. He's up there with Prescott. Because right now, he's not up there. He's too raw. He's got the athletic ability. He's got the basic arm talent. Basic. He still needs a lot of refinement in that area. He needs a lot of refinement with his mechanics. He needs a lot of experience that he has very little of at this point. So we're looking at a guy who could be a top 5 pick, or we're looking at a guy who might get the second or third round treatment just off of upside, body, all of that. He played at Ohio State, so, big college. So, he's not going to drop even as a developmental prospect as far as some other guys would that maybe play for a smaller school. So you're talking about anybody who give from a top 5 to a third round flyer. So Cardell Jones is a guy to watch in how he develops. Not quite, maybe even more than Dak Prescott is. because we have a lot of film on Prescott. We don't have as much on Jones. So, in that respect, the quarterback position, as well as a couple of the guys you mentioned, Goff, this is going to be one of those quarterback situations where, we've got a lot of guys who normally right now wouldn't be top 5 consideration, but these guys got a lot of potential. What they're going to do, where before they're like, well, we're talking about these guys, we wish they would have come out last year because it was a weak class or a weaker class than we're used to. But now we're talking about, they wouldn't have been, they would have been picked relatively high last year, but, they're not really being picked that high now, but this year, everything hinges on what these guys do this year, how they develop this year, what's going to happen this year. So this year is extremely important for the quarterback situation because you don't have that surefire 100% star.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of there were two draft classes that had similar quarterback situations. 2003, the Carson Palmer draft, and 2011, the Cam Newton draft. And Cam Newton wasn't even on teams' boards, but Auburn went on that run. He emerged into the number 1 pick. Jake Locker was the consensus number 1 player heading into that season, but he played really poorly against the Nebraska team with Prince Amukamara and Alfonso Denard at the time. And there was Jared Crick was on that roster as well. He didn't show up against that defense, and as a result, I think that really caused teams to mark down some red flags. They picked his game apart. Christian Ponder was another pro-style quarterback in that discussion, but his only good moment was the Senior Bowl. If you looked at his overall tape outside of his Senior Bowl tape, you're talking about a late second, early third round pick. And then with I thought Christian Ponder and Locker were going to end up being the 2 best quarterbacks. I said Blaine Gabbert would be a bust, and that was the only thing I was right on. I said Cam Newton would be solid, but he wouldn't be an elite quarterback. And that's debatable because he got the new contract. I'm going to admit I was wrong on that one because Cam Newton had a pretty big impact his rookie year. And he's been 14-2 in the month of December as a starter, so I'm going to say I was wrong about 2011, and I did a horrible job scouting that draft class, but this is going to be just like 2011. We don't know who's going to emerge, and then there were guys like Dalton Kaepernick that came out of nowhere and made their presence known as second-round picks. So this definitely feels like 2011 all over again 5 years later. We don't know who the top guys are, and Dak Prescott, I want to see how he does without his offensive lineman, because if he plays well without his star offensive lineman and running back, he's deserving of being the top quarterback drafted, and that's that. And if he doesn't, he's a third-round pick. With Cardale Jones, there are things I like and I dislike about him. He has the best footwork among any quarterback in the draft. He's got the best cannon arm in terms of arm strength, and he's got the best size. So there's physical tools there. Momentum. Cardale Jones is a master of building momentum. And if he gets 1 third down conversion, he's going to build – the rest of the team is going to feel more confident around Cardale Jones. And it's going to translate to momentum and points. And none of the other quarterbacks bring that kind of presence. That's the thing I've noticed with Cardale Jones. If you keep this guy from getting a first down – which we haven't seen yet. The moment we see a defense keeping Cardale Jones from getting a first down, we're going to get to see how he reacts. Can teams build a lead off that? Can teams capitalize that? How will he react if he's down by 2 touchdowns? That's when we're really going to see Cardale Jones being tested. What I don't like is how he only runs spread offense plays. I think that's a concern at this point, and I don't know if he's going to do it. We also need to see how he's going to do without his receivers. Devin Smith, gone. Evan Spencer, or the other receiver that got drafted out of Ohio State, gone. Jeff Heuerman, the tight end, gone. Those guys didn't get us 100 receptions, 1,000 receiving yards, 10 receiving touchdowns. Devin Smith may have had 10 receiving touchdowns. But the bottom line is those guys aren't going to be there to catch the ball next year. He's going to have a whole new set of receivers to work with, and he's only started 3 games, so he is raw. He has the upside to be a Dante Culpepper or a Ben Roethlisberger. But at the same time, he's raw. So that's a concern at this point. But I think he's better than Connor Cook because Connor Cook is a guy, he's more of a finished product than a guy with a lot of upside. And I think that's why I'd have him in the 19 to 20 range. I think Hackenberg is the best quarterback in this draft, and you didn't give me your thoughts on Hackenberg, but I saw a lot of NFL throws from his part. He regressed without Allen Robinson, and now he's going to lose Jesse James and his left tackle, Donovan Smith, and he's losing Miles Defenbach, the left guard, as well. So how Hackenberg does with zero playmakers around him and Dak Prescott are going to have no playmakers. They're going to have to carry the offenses all by themselves. And whichever guy, whether it's Prescott or Hackenberg, can do that, make NFL throws without a legit supporting cast, that's going to be the first quarterback taken. Agree or disagree with that assessment?
I agree at this point. I like Hackenberg, but as you said, right now he's in the same boat as Prescott. Prescott lost practically his entire offensive line to the NFL draft. Now you're looking at the other side of the ball. It's like Hackenberg, lost his weapons to the NFL draft. So, it's how they respond at this point. Hackenberg is the better pro-ready quarterback. I think Prescott has the most upside from what I've seen. So right now you have two polar opposites, one that's ready to play right now, one that, may take a little bit, may start out as the number 2 guy. Both lost their stars. Both lost their help. Both lost their weapons. Which one of these guys who play different games, in some senses, one that's ready to plug into the starting lineup, one that's probably going to take a little bit of time, which one of them are going to stand out? Or are both of them going to stand out? And if both of them stand out, that's a topic for discussion for a later date, because then it really gets exciting as to what happens. So, that's where I stand on that at this point.
Yeah, with me, I think Hackenberg is the number 1 quarterback. I want to say it's tough to say after that because I think Cardale Jones is the most upside. Connor Cook can play every offense just like Hackenberg. He's the second best quarterback at playing every type of offense, but there's a lot of inconsistency, and I think he's maxed out his upside. So I don't think he'll end up succeeding as a starter for some reason. My gut tells me he won't. My gut's rarely wrong. Jared Goff, I think Goff could be an Aaron Rodgers type player, but at the same time, we need to see him make more progressions. If he can do that, he's going to be a star. And if he can't, he's going to be a Kyle Bowler or a Brett Hundley or a guy that we're going to forget about in 3 years. But at the same time, I'm looking at him and Cardale Jones. He made some he made some progressions. I mean, he needs to improve his progressions, but he showed me more ability to make progressions than Jared Goff. So I think Hackenberg's a top 5 guy. Cardale Jones is a top 10 quarterback. And you look at Goff, he's a top 15 guy, and Connor Cook, he's a top 20 guy. So that's where I stand on the quarterbacks at this point. That's going to change, though, as the games progress throughout the regular season.
Yeah,
where would you project a quarterback in the first round?
Well, I'm going to go a little bit different with projecting on this one. I'm going to go with, comparison to the player. As like I said before, Connor Cook, Andy Dalton, slightly better version of Andy Dalton. You look at Goff. Yeah, I agree. Aaron Rodgers type. Aaron Rodgers spent 4 years on the bench, and now he's the best in the NFL. That to me is a good comparison. I'm not saying he's going to have 4 years on the bench, but he's going to have, and he'll probably be drafted about that same range. Then you got the Cardale Jones. I don't know how much I'm going to get for this, but, from watching him, you look at Ben Roethlisberger. You have a big guy who, and he's got all the tools, but, like a lot of guys in this draft class, needs a little bit of refinement. Doesn't have a lot of experience. Once he gets that, it's like sky's the limit. And you see what happens. So basically, for me, it's like an Hackenberg, maybe on a lesser scale, maybe Teddy Bridgewater, to a lesser degree. But when you look at him, it's like you have a lot of upside. The question is what these guys do with their upside, and that, I think, more than anything with the quarterbacks is what I'm excited to see.
Yep, I'm in agreement there. And on Monday, I'm probably going to do an MLB draft exclusive because the MLB draft's going to be at 6 p.m. I'm guessing you'll be working Monday, but if you're not, we could do another NFL show. But I'm thinking whenever you're not working or whenever we have an off day, that's the best day to do it. I also want to do a future show where we just watch Alabama tape because they have 3 first-round prospects in Henry, O.J. Howard, and Ashawn Robinson. And we could get Kerm on, and Kerm can assign us each an Alabama player. And we take turns talking about that player, listening to what the other 2 have to say. And it'd be like a little collaboration thing.
Yeah, I think something to look at into the future would possibly be a round table, where we get a few guys in here and when we go 2 or 3 hours, and it's just like put right before the draft, put prospect down, discuss that prospect down, discuss that prospect, just get a round table and just go around and discuss these prospects.
Yeah, that's what RSD Football does on YouTube, and I want to do that with different sports and different draft classes, like the NHL, MLB, and MLS. But I know you're strictly a football guy, so whenever you're on, I'm going to do my best to make sure we're only talking about football because
I'm actually looking to expand at this point. Like I said before, I'll talk to you about it later, when we get off the air. I've been talking the last couple of days with different people, and I just finalized something literally while we were on the air to get something else rolling. So, I mean, I've got a few different options I'm going with. So, and I'm looking to expand out, and this will help me expand out a little bit more as we go. So that's a stay tuned thing.
That's fantastic. And with the Draft Utopia podcast, I think Calpote said you can't let the podcast control you. You have to control the podcast. And he said this after I made the announcement that I'm strongly considering no longer doing Talk Shoe after 200 episodes. Because if we're getting 23, 20, 130, 140, and 88 viewers in 4 episodes of The War Room on YouTube, and we're only getting maybe 20 to 50 downloads at best on TalkShoe, that means YouTube is going to give us more exposure. And if people see our faces, they see the tape we're showing, we can send that to other companies for resume building, and they will pay us money if we like their offer. And that'll give us leverage. So,
well, you're more of a face for TV. I'm more of a face for radio, so we'll take that as it is.
Yeah, we will, but I think that having that aspect of it definitely helps both of us out, and I want to see what we can do with this because it's off. The War Room is off to a good start, and I thought I wasn't going to have time to do any shows until Wednesday, but I already completed my 3-round MLB mock draft, the final mock that I'm going to be posting on Monday, and I went through it. I made a few adjustments. I saw the top 5 on MLB.com, and Charlie Campbell actually posted his MLB mock this morning as well. And I
didn't know Charlie did MLB.
Yeah, he's done MLB mock drafts since the 2013 MLB mock.
Really? Huh. I thought he only did football because I know he worked for Pooter Report. I thought that's what he did there.
mean, he does MLB and NFL mocks for Walter Football. Paul Banks does the NBA stuff along with they brought in another Michael Elworth. I think his site, I don't know. But Paul Banks does the NBA stuff. And I've got enough of a resume to, like, if I ever went broke, I could probably take everything I know about hockey and do hockey for Walter Football. I don't know if he'd hire me or bring me on, but I've got, like, the image files for everything. He could modify those, and we could get something up. So
yeah, and well, I don't think you're going to go under anytime soon, so I don't really think you had to worry about that at this point.
Yeah, but that's the only draft his site doesn't cover. He covers every other draft except the MLS draft, and I'm not going to give him shit for not covering that because he thinks the MLS is for sissies that run around in shorts, and you can make the argument that it is, and ESPN stopped airing the MLS Super Draft this year. Now it's only on YouTube for live streaming. So
I don't know, the short shorts got Beckham victorious, so I guess it got something out of it.
Yeah, that's true. It got David Beckham and Landon Donovan victory, and we'll see what happens with that. But I definitely think the War Room is a thing that could become bigger. And as much as I enjoy doing the Draft Utopia podcast, it's going to have to stop at some point. Otherwise, we're letting the podcast control us, which is what Cowpoke said. It said, usually, you can't let the podcast control you. And I kind of agree with that. So if this is...
that podcast only has so much room for growth. TalkShoe, I don't think, has a lot of room for growth. And if the company that you're working under the umbrella of doesn't have room for growth, then the entire product doesn't have the same room for growth.
I live in the 724 area. That's the area code where I live in, 724, and that's the area code for TalkShoe. And the place that used to run TalkShoe, they moved their headquarters, and I don't know, their headquarters were right by the Total Learning Center and the Panera in Wexford. So I think that aspect of it definitely affected where each thing stood. So I like the direction this is going in, and YouTube has far more exposure than TalkShoe. I'm not going to pay money to do something on Blog Talk Radio or Spreaker because I think TalkShoe has a bigger platform. I think iHeartRadio probably costs money to use as well, and I don't want to have to pay money to use a podcasting service. But if there is a service that's going to get me more viewers than TalkShoe and it's completely free, then I'm probably going to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I agree. It's like you'd be foolish not to. It's it would be nice if you could do both, but in the end, it's if one is holding you back, you have to cut that one loose.
That's how business works, and all companies think like that.
Yep.
Kerm's on board with this, and he thinks we should try to make something where we edit something and try to put it into the clip. And I think you can do that with YouTube. Like, you can take something from a certain clip and find a way to edit it in. I'm not sure how to do that, but I think there is a way to do that with YouTube. I know there is a way to do that.
I know people do it with video games with imaging cards. They get the video, they copy it down on the card, they edit it out. Capture cards, I think they're called. So you may be able to do that if you get big enough computer base. You might even be able to get one that, if you're willing to shell out the money, that you can incorporate directly into the hard drive. But that's something that you can look into more, since your nice little curly hair is the one on the screen.
Jesse Lucas is on board with this idea as well. And there are other people besides us that I want to bring on. Scott Delfave from our group mock. He runs End Zone Score. He writes for them. He actually has a writer that's looking for work, but I am already full as it is. So if you want to contact Scott, he's another NFL writer. So if you want a second NFL writer for Draft Evolution to challenge Kern for that secondary job behind yourself, you can bring this guy in and see what he can do, and I can get something set up. So in the future, I'm thinking in 2 or 3 years from now, your staff will be you, Kerm, your nephew, your cousin, this guy that Scott has, and maybe Grace. And that would be your starting 5. That's all.
This guy, that guy, you, Kerm, this other person over here, my cat sitting here. That's my starting 5. Oh, wait, that's 6. Sorry. But yeah,
the cat can be the 6th man,
Joey. It's that's one of the things I'll talk to you about when we get off here, though. I've got because it all falls into literally what I was just able to do while we were on here. So that's something that we'll get into then.
Yeah, at a later date.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to try to keep getting more guests to come on the War Room, because I think this thing is taking off, and we'll see how many views our videos get. Because I remember when I first did Talk Shoe, we used to get like 50 to 300 downloads. And now we're not getting those kind of numbers, and we're getting really good numbers. And we only got like 10 or 20 views for my first 30 shows, and I'm already at 80, 140, 20, and 23 for my first 4 videos. So to get viewers like that, I really appreciate it, guys. And if I can network and expand and get more subscribers, then we're set. I mean, this is the right idea, and we can see what we're going to do here. So thanks for coming on. This is going to wrap it up for this edition of the War Room. We'll talk later, Joey. So the video will be up on YouTube in about 3. So I'll share it then, and we'll talk later, Joey.
Alrighty.